My name is Mike Alpert. I was born Motel Kaplan in 1931. I was told it was February, either the 2nd or the 7th. The first memory that I have, I must have been maybe 3 years or 4 years old when the little shtetl was on fire. Many houses burned down. And what I remember is me and my brother, I think my sister, were put on a horse-drawn wagon and taken away from our house while it was burning, and taken away to a farmhouse outside the little town. This is my first recollection, what I remember as a child. The town where I was born is in eastern Poland. The town had 3 names. In Yiddish it was Zettel, in Polish it was Jęczol, and the Russian, which is now Belarus, it's called Dyatlovo. From what I remember at the town of Zettel, I remember the big square. In the square, stores, which were clothing, hardware stores, a drugstore, a candy store. There was a market day once a week. People used to come, bring different things to buy and sell. These are people made a living. There were certainly a poor class of people, middle class, and there were a few wealthy people. And I remember the Catholic church in the middle of town, which looked like the Empire State Building here when I was 6 or 8 years old. We had all type of organizations, movies once in a while. We had theater. We had everything there to sustain our lives. The next thing I remember is moving in to the new rebuilt house, which was built from scratch, wooden log house, but pretty large, tall ceilings, a few rooms, nice windows, an oven in the middle of the house, not a wooden floor, a sand floor from the beginning. We had a master bedroom, I would say, a other bedroom where I slept. I don't remember till this day. But I did not lack any, I didn't miss anything. We had no running water in the house. We had no toilet in the house. The water, we had to go to a well, get water. The toilet, we had to go outside in a little shack. But we didn't know of anything better. I remember we had electricity, and I remember we had radio plugged in. The house was built like a 2-family house. One side we lived, one side my aunt and uncle and the 2 daughters. We always had people living with us in the house. I remember my father's mother, which was my grandmother, was always living with us. And I think she was part of the business. She was a business lady. I remember my father sleeping late, but she was up early in the morning doing whatever had to be done. We always had more people than the family itself. Somehow, the master bedroom was always rented out. For what reason? Maybe it was for financial reasons, maybe they wanted to have people with higher education, influence or whatever, but there were always either teachers or somebody culturally involved that lived with us. I had our older sister, which I think she was born 1924, possibly 23. Her name was Motel Kaplan, 8 years older than I was. She was sent away to Warsaw to learn a trade, which must have been in 1937, 38, right before the war. And after the Russian invaded our part of Belarus, she came back to Zettel. But she was away for a year or two in Warsaw, which she stayed with my mother's aunt in Warsaw, which was married to one of the famous detectives in all of the world, for sure Poland. This was my sister was staying with in Warsaw. I had an older brother. I think he was born in 1926. His name was Motel Kaplan. My brother was maybe 5 years older than I was. He was the type like an intellectual. He liked to read books. He was I think, very liberal, a very good guy. My mother's name was Leah Kovinsky. She was born in 1900. She had a father that I remember, my grandfather. I don't remember my mother's mother. I remember her grandmother, which lived to be 107. And when we came to visit her, she used to recognize us by our voices and touching. My mother was a housewife. She attended to the livestock. We always had a cow. We always had chickens. We even had geese that we raised for Yontef and stuffed them. They should become fat. She made her own butter, baked her own bread. Leah was known to neighbors, used to say they smell when she baked the bread. She was a real good cook, and I would say a good mother, a good wife. What do I remember about my father? My father's name was Motel Kaplan. He was born in 1890. He was, I think, very good looking. He was 10 years older than my mother. He had a sixth finger. This is why they called him Yankel der Shistak. Yankel with 6 fingers. My father was businessman. I remember him buying linen, and I guess they resold it. They bought feathers, they resold it. I know he always slept very late. I never remember seeing him coming home to sleep in a normal time. But I think from what I know, he was a card player. And he played cards with a few Jewish people, but mostly with Polish people. And they were his friends, and he played cards. When he was involved, I guess after he got up in the morning to see what his mother and his wife did from business, what they did. This is what I remember. I thought he was a kind man. I thought he was a very good father. I think I had a good childhood. I was not abused by anybody. My father once in a while would put me into the corner, facing the wall. This was the extent of my punishment. I got along with my sister and brother and cousins, which were next door. It was a happy family. When I was born, the town had about 5,000 Jews and some Belarus and mostly Polish people. The town was not a religious town, what we think of Eastern Europe. No pious. It was considered a very progressive Jewish shtetl. I remember going to synagogue on holidays when my father went. He took me. There were a few synagogues. There was a Hebrew school, a Jewish school, and a Polish school. I attended Yiddish Volksschule. Darlene attended the Hebrew school. My cousins went to Hebrew school from my father's side. My cousins from my mother's side went to Yiddish school. The Yiddish school were considered Bundisten. The Hebrew school were considered Zionists. The Jewish population of Shtetl were shoemakers, suit makers, storekeepers, farming, mill workers. Wood were sold, which was my uncle was part of it. It was a lively, small town until the Germans came.